Well, when it comes to ACC basketball or ACC sports in general, not too many people know more going on than Brett Friedlander, the ACC insider columnist for the Wilmington Star News. You can follow him on Twitter at Star News. How do we at Star News ACC? How are we doing, Brett?
We're doing great because you got me out of having to finish washing the dishes. So.
Oh, man, so you okay, wait a second.
So he owes us something.
I bought him lunch in Charlotte at the ACC football championship game, and now I got him out of doing dishes.
Hey, before we start the questioning, Brett, I just want you to see if you agree with me. Are you looking forward to the popcorn and the ice cream at the hospitality thing that they give us every year as much as I do?
Absolutely, the Dove Bars. It's like the
Dove
ACC
Bars
is, without a doubt, the most media-friendly league when it comes to stuff like that. Everybody else scripts. The NCAA tournament has just got to be almost like we're a nuisance to them. But the ACC treats us right, and yet I am looking forward to it. But I'm trying to. My goal this year is to limit myself to one Dove Bar game. So, or game.
No, he said game.
I do a game. I like how he said that. I do 2 popcorns a game and 1 Dove Bar. And you know what? The ACC tournament only lasts once a year. It only comes around once a year. I'm going to go ahead and just do it.
I hate y'all because I'm not going this year. So, Brett.
It comes around once a year, but if they add any more teams, it's going to last half the year. So,
yeah, I think first game kicks off at 7:30 Tuesday morning. But Brett, as we head into this final weekend of the regular season, give me a couple of things from this year in ACC basketball that has either caught your attention or made a lasting impression on you.
Well, the thing that's really kind of made a lasting impression is Virginia. I mean, I had them as the 4th best team in the league in the preseason. I thought they were going to be pretty good. I had no idea they were going to be this good, especially after they just got hammered by Tennessee by 35 just before New Year's. It's like, what's wrong with these guys? They also lost to UW Green Bay, and I think, sometimes I'm not a big proponent of good losses because I think every loss is a bad loss. But in the case of Virginia, I think getting just hammered by Tennessee was the best thing that ever happened to them because Tony Bennett kind of just looked at that team and said, this isn't working, and he basically turned those guys loose. He finally realized that he had some, much more athleticism and speed and just skill than he's had in the past with Malcolm Brogdon being healthy and Justin Anderson, coming into his own and the freshman point guard London Parentis, and I think he just kind of decided to turn those guys loose, and by doing so, they still play that great defense, but they've added that offensive element, and I think that of all the teams in the ACC, including the ones with all the name recognition, I think Virginia has got, without a doubt, the best chance of going the deepest into the NCAA tournament because they've got seniors, because they play great defense, and because they're an unselfish group that know their roles and really just kind of, sacrifice for the greater good. And that's the kind of team you really don't want to see. As for the other thing is the way Carolina has turned things around. 1-4 in the ACC. They look like they were dead in the water. Roy Williams just was getting ready to pull his hair out of his head. And P.S. they've won 12 straight now. And so that's really been a revelation to me. On the other side of the coin, I can't believe that Boston College is this bad. When the season started, I thought that Olivier Hanlon and Joe Rahan were one of the top 2 or 3 backcourts in the league. Ryan Anderson has been a 2nd or 3rd team all ACC player his first 2 years. They lost Dennis Clifford, their big man, and they really do have a problem inside. But I just thought they were going to be a lot better than they were. And then, of course, if you want to talk about the craziness and the head scratching, what do you make of Wake Forest?
Yeah.
They bookend their ACC home schedule with wins against Carolina and Duke, but yet in between they lose at home to Boston College and Georgia Tech, and they're right there around 500. And it's a much better. You would think, just looking at the talent that they have and the way they can play, it's a much better team than that.
Yeah, and the thing that kind of you mentioned, and I think another team, as you mentioned, you kind of look at it and say, wow, look what they did. I think you got to throw Clemson in there too. I think what Brownell and them have done with this team and having them in a chance to finish 5th in the ACC standings when we all picked them 14th at the beginning of the year. I think you got to give Coach Brownell and those guys a lot of credit as well. But I want to ask you about Mike Krzyzewski. What is his health like? Is this something that we need to be concerned about as they get into this tournament? Because that was a little kind of scary last night.
It was, and I was sitting right at the end of the Duke bench at Wake Forest, and I didn't see what happened because he was in the middle of the huddle, but I saw the trainer come running over there and walking Kay back to the huddle. I don't think this is a long-term thing. One of the local TV shows up here, TV news shows in the Raleigh area, had some footage of the game broadcast, and apparently Krzyzewski may have gotten hit in the head with a basketball, a loose ball along the bench, and that may have had something to do with it. Roy Williams has these, as we like to call them around here, Roy-to-go spells, where he just kind of gets up too fast and he kind of goes down to one knee and collects himself. I think had Duke won that game last night, you may have seen Krzyzewski come out and talk to the media. I think the fact that they lost the game, this was a good excuse to not have to deal with it and just send Wojo to go do it. He went to the hospital when he got back home to Durham yesterday. They did a few tests. I think they basically gave him some IV fluids for dehydration and stuff. I don't think it's going to be a long-term problem. We'll see. I mean, listen, Saturday night at Cameron, it's going to be hot in there, and we'll see how he reacts to that. But I think he's going to be fine. He was back in practice today.
We're talking with Brett Friedlander, the ACC insider columnist for the Wilmington Star News. You can follow him on Twitter at StarNewsACC. And speaking of Duke, Brett, are they in trouble moving forward because they finished with a losing record in ACC road play for only the second time, I think, under Krzyzewski? I just think this is a ball club that's become too reliant on the three-point shot, and then you see them go cold like they did last night at Wake. I think that potentially is going to be tough on them advancing very far in the NCAA tournament.
It is. It's kind of an un-Duke-like team. It's really kind of a dysfunctional team, too. I mean, they play hard defensively sometimes, and then other times they don't. And, unlike Duke teams of the past, this team is prone to going into, to scoring droughts. Last night, they got outscored 17-0, over a 5-minute stretch late in the game. They against Notre Dame, they were up 10 with 6 minutes to go and went 6 minutes without, scoring a field goal. And lost that game. In Clemson, you saw what happened early in the second half. They went cold from the field and they stopped scoring. Krzyzewski really has not set on a rotation all year. I mean, there are times when Rashid Suleiman plays 38 minutes, and then there are times when he'll play 22. Quinn Cook, sometimes when he gets in the doghouse, he'll play 12 minutes, and other times he'll play the whole game. And Andre Dawkins right now looks like he's kind of lost. So, I think with Duke, a lot of it is going to depend on matchups, who they play against and what style they play. But this is definitely a flawed Duke team. But, you can basically say that about any, of the Big Four in the ACC. I mean, Syracuse clearly is a flawed team. Carolina with Marcus Page isn't really great. And Leslie McDonald doesn't make a three-pointer every now and then. They're a very average team as well. So each of those four teams has got its flaws, and a lot is going to depend on who they get matched up on with, who before they play them loses. In 2010, Duke wasn't the best team in the nation. They won the national championship. Why? If you go back and look, every round, and it's uncanny that every round that they played the lowest possible seed that they could play in that round. So a lot of it depends on a lot of variables. But, Duke needs for Jabari Parker to not get into foul trouble, and they need one of their perimeter guys or two of their perimeter guys to make three-pointers. And, they've looked pretty bad against zones from time to time, including last night. So, that's definitely a team that could go out early.
When we're talking about the NCAA tournament, the ACC's got 5 teams that a lot of people think are pretty much in. Could they get 6 or could they get 7? What do we know? What do we think about Clemson, Florida State maybe sneaking in?
Well, we'll know a little bit more, I would say, after Sunday. The team right now that I'm really worried about is Pittsburgh because they've been in. I mean, they've been solidly in for the longest time, and right now they can't buy a win. I mean, if they go down to Clemson on Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember when they play, but if they go down
Saturday.
to Clemson this weekend and get beat, you know, even though they've got 22 wins and 10 in the ACC, you know, I think they've won 3 of their last 10 games. They're 3-7 in their last 10, and all 3 are in overtime. You know, so that's not a good way to go into the tournament. I think Clemson will really help itself if it can win against Pitt. I think Florida State is definitely in if it can win against Syracuse on Sunday. And I think that NC State, after being just basically taking itself out of contention by losing to Miami at home last weekend, put itself back on the bubble with the win against Pittsburgh. I think all 3 of those teams, Florida State, Clemson, and NC State, all need to do some work in Greensboro. I think that if Clemson wins against Pittsburgh this weekend, I think a win on Thursday in Greensboro probably gets them in.
Wow.
We'll see. I think NC State probably needs to win 2 games in Greensboro. They need to get probably to the semifinals. But it's going to be worth watching. And, again, a lot depends on how other bubble teams do and how, you know, those teams in the one-bid leagues, you know, you don't want any upsets. You want everything to go chalk, because if the favorites in those leagues win, then you don't get a second team in the Missouri Valley. You don't get a second team, you know, maybe in the Southern, you know, and teams and conferences like that. And that definitely helps teams like Clemson that are on the bubble.
One last question here before we let you go. KJ McDaniels, can he make first-team All-ACC with the way he's played this year?
He should, but he won't.
That was my question.
I mean, you look at his stats, and not only the scoring on a team that's offensively challenged, but, you know, he's going to be the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I am absolutely convinced of that. I'm going to vote for him on that. I've got to vote on the first team. I'm going to have him on the first team, but I just don't think that there are enough people who are going to look past the fact that he's on Clemson, number 1, and number 2, he's not, you know, on that, you know, that elite team that I don't think he's going to get first team. I think he's going to end up with a second team. You know, you have T.J. Warren, who's going to lead the league in scoring from NC State. He's going to be on the first team, but I think the other 4 spots are going to go to a guy from Syracuse, a guy from Carolina, a guy from Duke, and then the other one would be a wild card. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's going to be tough given the way the voting usually breaks. But he definitely deserves it.
Yeah, Brett, before we let you go, let me ask you this. I mean, first team All-ACC doesn't necessarily mean who's most valuable to their team. And quite frankly, I don't think Joe Harris makes first team All-ACC, but I think Joe Harris and KJ McDaniels may be as valuable to their particular basketball team as any player in the ACC. So that gets a little bit confusing.
And, Joe Harris is a really good example of a guy who really should be rewarded for, last year he was the third leading vote getter for ACC Player of the Year. He averaged 19 points a game. Well, this year he's averaging 11 points a game, and it's not because he's playing lousy. It's because he has basically sacrificed his statistics to make Virginia a much more balanced team. And because of it, Virginia cut down some nets last Saturday and is going to be wearing some rings for an ACC regular season championship. He basically sacrificed his personal stats for the greater good, and you would love to see a kid like that rewarded. And oh, by the way, there's a kid by the name of Malcolm Brogdon who plays for Virginia, who is really good as well. Also, he's their leading scorer, like 13.6 per game. That Virginia team gets overlooked even more than Clemson, and it's really crazy because they're the number 1 team in the league.
All right, Brett, tell our listeners, A, where they can find your work, B, they can follow you on Twitter at Star News ACC. Great time to do it if they aren't already with the tournament coming up next week. And then I'm sure we can count on you being somewhere in particular about 9 o'clock on Saturday night, huh?
Yeah, I'll probably be at Cameron Indoor Stadium. It'll be fun, even with Duke's loss yesterday. In fact, I think because of Duke's loss, Duke may have gotten caught looking a little ahead to that Carolina game. After what happened at the Dean Dome, they're going to be ready, and it's going to be crazy, I can tell you that. And I'm going to wear an old shirt because I'll end up with blue body paint all over the back of it like I did for the Syracuse game.
All right. Well, have fun there. Enjoy the end of the regular season. When you see Will up in Greensboro next week, y'all can punch each other out for me since I don't get to make the trip this year. I'm staying home to cover some stuff.
We'll just eat a popcorn and a Dove bar.
Okay, there you go. All right, Brett. Thank you much.
Bar for you.
All right. Yeah, it'll be melted by the time it gets back to me, so y'all enjoy it for me, okay?
All right.
Thanks much.
See ya.
Brett Friedlander, one of the best when it comes to ACC.
Knows his stuff.
Mean, knows his stuff. And then number two, of all the guests that we get on this show and across the station, nobody can hold court in a hospitality suite like Brett Friedlander can. Absolutely. Drinks are on him in the hospitality room every year at ACC football kickoff. Why? Because they're free. So, all right, before we get out to break, let's